Hi everyone. This lecture is going to be about mirroring versus non-mirroring and modeling versus not modeling your class. And we, as a yoga teacher training, the group of us, me and Julian Alexander and Victoria too. Victoria's style of teaching is a little bit different. So she does model a lot, but that's because of the way she teaches, and you'll get to find that out from her. We we try to teach you to teach a class without modeling it. So without, doing the entire practice with your class. Now, with the way that we've had to move virtually or, to all these streaming classes, I had to relearn how to teach. I have to model everything because you might be teaching to a blank screen. I don't know what the future of teaching is going to look like. Yes, ideally we would all love to be back in our studios and in our spaces and teaching to live people. Whether we're at our schools or we are at our jobs or we are in the studio or in our gym or wherever it is we're going to be. But that's just not reality right now. We are, most places are still closed or at least limiting. So we are now teaching virtually, and we have to model the entire class because you might teach to a group of 25 people and everyone has their screen turned off. I don't keep my screen on often when I am taking a class, when I am a student in class. So what I'm going to say is not going to really have anything to do with the it is a discussion that we need to have. So I'm going to include all that too. So teaching virtually, you are, depending on how someone is viewing the screen and what device you're using, you are going to be a mirror image. You might say, when they're looking at you on the screen and it says, you're going to say, raise your right hand up over your head, they might see you doing that on the left-hand side because they're looking directly at you. And that's kind of how it is in the studio as well. But I know sometimes, and it depends on what you're using, your image might be flipped. So as you are teaching virtually, if you say you're going to bring your right hand up over your head, you bring your right hand up over your head. The person following you is going to interpret that on their own. Your students are going to interpret that on their own. You are going to literally, you're just dictating what you're doing is the best way that I can explain it, because you have to tell them exactly what you're still talking them through the class. You can't just let them watch you because they're not going to be able to strain their neck to watch the screen. They might glance up to make sure that they're doing what you're asking them to do. But you could also be teaching to someone who is hearing impaired. Maybe they can't use their closed captioning on their device or whatever it is. So when you are teaching virtually, when you are streaming your classes, the best thing I can tell you to do is model everything. Now, when I'm teaching some of my classes, they will keep the screen on, and I can walk up to the screen and I can see what they're doing and I can comment on them, what they're doing. But sometimes it's not the best view. They might have the screen down at their feet and they're standing up so you can't really see. So you're gonna have to just assume that they're doing what you're asking them to do. It's since a couple of you already teach group fitness classes, you kind of know where I'm coming from. But if you've never taught a class before, it's just very different to have to teach through a screen, especially when nobody has their screen on and you feel like you're talking to yourself. Kind of like when I'm doing these videos, these lectures. It's strange. If you're teaching on Facebook Live, if you're teaching in a Microsoft group meeting, if you're teaching via Zoom or FitGrid, or I don't even know what all the programs are that are out there. You could be teaching on YouTube. I don't know. So you're going to have to basically just describe everything that you're doing or do everything that you're talking about. When you are teaching to a live class, we would prefer that you not do a lot of modeling, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Your body is different than the people in your classroom or in your studio. You may be in a different place in your practice. You might have more flexibility than some of the people taking your class. You might not have as much flexibility as the people in your class. You might be able to do some a little more intensive postures that they cannot do. Uh, your body shape might be different than the people in your class. You know, we are teaching to people that are all shapes and sizes, and they come from all different sorts of backgrounds. You could have someone that comes in with a complete hip replacement, or they have vertebral fusions where they've had to, have rods stuck up through their vertebral column, or they've been fused together in some other way, metal plates, and they don't have the same range of motion. So you don't want people to think, well, this is not an accessible class to me because I cannot do what the instructor is doing. We don't want them to compare. We don't want that comparison because it's just not fair. Of course, that all flies out the window when we're teaching virtually because it's just a whole other beast. It's just something completely different. So when you are teaching a class, ideally, we would like for you to be able to teach, if not all of the class, at least like 75% of your class without modeling. Being able to be very descriptive with your words and being able to guide them into the postures that you would like for them to be in by just using your words. So in order to do that, you really have to kind of know the alignment of all the postures. And don't worry, we will help you learn all of that, but there are also, millions of books out there too that will help you, and you will get a sequencing book, and you will get some, and that will give you some, common postures and things in there, but we'll hit on that again. I'll do lectures on that, and when I meet with you, we will definitely talk about the alignment of the postures. So you may or may not be in a studio that has mirrors, so they won't be able to see behind you to see what is going on behind your back if you were to bring your hands behind your back. So in one aspect, they could watch the mirrors to see what you're doing. There are some instructors who their back is facing the classroom and their mirror is in front of them, and they are kind of projecting into the mirror. They're looking at you through the mirror so that you can see what they're doing, and they're in sync with you. So they are going to the right side when you are going to the right side. They're going to the left when you go to the left side. So that is a way you could teach. It's not a way that generally we do teach our practice. But again, Victoria, who you will meet, she teaches in a completely different way, in a great way. It's just different from how we are teaching you to teach a vinyasa practice, because Victoria has her own style. But when we talk about mirroring versus non-mirroring, if you are facing your class and you say, raise your right hand up over your head, you're going to have to raise if you tell them to raise their right hand, you're going to have to raise your left because you are facing them. So that when we say you need to mirror your class, that's what we're talking about. It gets to be very, very, very confusing, because then you start to question, what is your right side and what is your left side? Am I telling them the right side? Oh my gosh, what did I just say? Sometimes I can't even remember which is my right and my left in this at any point, because when I am trying to mirror the class, because I just get so confused. So when we went through our yoga teacher training, or when Julie and I and Amanda went through our yoga teacher training for Love Your Brain, which is the traumatic brain injury certification that we took, they taught us to, and this is a common way to teach too, I just had never taught that way, but to teach using landmarks in the room. So if you want to mirror your class and you're confused about what is right or left, find landmarks in the room. In our studio at 7 Studios, if I'm teaching in Studio 1 and I have my back to the shelf where the studio or the stereo component is behind us, and I am looking at my class, because that's the side of the room I always stand on. The window is my right side, and the gray wall or the mat wall where all the mats are rolled up, that's my left-hand side. So you could say, if you are mirroring your class, instead of saying raise your right hand, say raise the hand closest to the window. You're going to turn towards the mat wall. And it doesn't matter where you're teaching, you just pinpoint landmarks that are perceptible to you and to your class. It can't be like, oh, that purple shirt over by, like the way when I'm thinking of, like when I teach at Lululemon or when I've taught at Athleta, when you're inside the store and they move their stuff all around sometimes, or you don't know which side of the room you're going to teach from, you want to try to find something that everybody can see. So you can't just say those black pants or whatever. Find something, a landmark, wherever you're teaching. If you're teaching in Studio 2 at this studio, at 7 Studios, and we usually teach, I don't know which direction that would be. We teach against the wall that has, well, they both sides have mirrors in Studio 2. But when you walk in the front door of Studio 2 and you look to your right, that's where we usually teach from, because that stereo is over there on that right-hand side. So again, your landmarks in that room could be the bars and the window. You know, the front of the mat, the back of the mat. The front of the mat is going to be the front of their mat, not the front of the room necessarily, but the front of the mat. The back of the mat is going to be what is behind them. You can say the long side of the mat that's closest to the mat wall. You could always say the long side of the mat closest to the windows. So that's the easiest way to instruct when you're mirroring, is to use a landmark, because like I said, it will confuse you. If you are trying to instruct them to do something on the right, but you are lifting your left hand, because then you just gets all combobulated. Now, there are times when I have turned my back to my class and I have, you know, and I'll say, I'm going to turn my back to you for a moment. I apologize. You're going to have to project your voice louder to be heard, because now you are taking the direction of your voice and you're focusing it towards a wall most of the time. So you do want to be a little bit louder. You want to project your voice so they can hear you even though you're turning your back to them. And try not to do that for very long. You want to turn back around and make sure that they're doing what you're asking them to do, or be doing it in a safe way. Now, they don't have to do exactly what you ask. You know, we're not dictating that they do anything. If you can kind of think of as your job as a yoga instructor is to be the tour guide, right? You can suggest what museum they might want to go see, or what restaurant they might want to eat in. You can suggest that we're going to come into Warrior One, or we're going to come into that high lunge or pigeon pose. But if it's not accessible to them, you always want to make it very clear that if it doesn't work for them that day, to honor their body, and they only do what feels good to them. It's their practice. You are just helping to guide them. Another thing too with the modeling is that, say you're in a forward fold and you are bringing your forehead down towards your knees and you're trying to talk to your class. Where is your voice going? It's going right into your legs. If you are, if you are, say you're in a supine twist and you turn your head away from your class. Now you're projecting your voice away from the class. If you are, face against the floor, your voice gets muffled by the floor. So you want to make sure you're still projecting, that your voice is still going towards your class. And then especially if it's a big class and you have a lot of music, if you have loud music, then you need to be able to project over that. And if your back is to your class, or you get your head buried in your chest or in your belly, they're not going to be able to hear you. So mirroring is okay, because if you're going to model something, it's perfectly fine, but use those landmarks. When you first start teaching, it's going to be more comfortable to model because you are going to be experiencing what they're experiencing, and we totally understand that. Every single person that has ever gone through our yoga teacher training, even when I first started teaching, and I'm sure Julie and Alexander and will tell you the same thing, that and you can ask Victoria too, because you're going to be meeting with her soon. We model just like you will probably to start, and it's okay. We just start to phase it out, and you will get there, don't worry. Everybody's afraid that they won't, but you will, so don't worry about that. And another thing that is common, is a common question, is do you write out your classes? Do you have to memorize them? Can you keep your notes with you? Should you come in with a plan? Yes to all that. In my opinion, writing things down helps to bring them into memory. It is a scientifically proven fact that if you write things down, you are helping to internalize it, and you're helping to memorize it. Is it okay to keep your notes with you? Absolutely. Absolutely. Is it okay to be one of those teachers who can just teach off the top of their head and move at a moment's notice and teach it off the fly? Absolutely. Perfectly fine. I just suggest having things laid out. I write it out. I have journal after journal after journal for all the years I've been teaching, that I write my classes out, and I have to do that to help me memorize. Now, can I teach without a notebook? Of course I can. But I've been teaching for a little while. When I first started teaching, I could not. My nerves would get the best of me. I would forget exactly what was going on as soon as I walked in the door. So I used to teach with my notes in front of me. And then gradually over, a couple of weeks, couple months, I could keep those notes nearby, but I didn't need to have my notebook open in front of me. Like maybe it was off to the side. And then it gradually progressed to I could keep my notebook in the car. And then it would progress to I could keep my notebook at home. And now it's just something I refer to at home. I'll write it out. I have my ideas. I still write it out though, because I also like to look back and see, have I been repeating the same sequence too long? Did I mix up all my classes? Did I, have we been starting in this child's pose every class for the last 5 classes? I just like to keep things fresh and keep people, guys, and keep them on their toes, I guess. Now, I will repeat a class a couple of days in a week. There are times that I have been up to teaching 10 classes a week, which is insanity on top of my other jobs at this point. So that was a bit much, and I have since backed away and kind of listened to my husband. He was, said, could you please come back home, Melissa, because I miss you. So I did. But you do not have to reinvent the wheel every single time you teach. You could, so and say if I'm going to teach, right now I'm teaching 6 or 7 classes a week. Depending on where I'm teaching, I might teach the same class for, I'll teach it at Lifetime, I'll teach it at 7 Studios, and then I'll teach it at Next Level. And then I'll mix it up. So you can teach the same class a couple times. And when you are first learning to teach, my top suggestion to you is teach the same class several times. Doesn't matter if you have the same people in the class, teach it several times. You are building up confidence in your teaching abilities. You are building up confidence in your verbiage. What are you saying? How are you directing? How are you cueing your alignment? And, you can always add in different variations, but keep the basic foundation of your class the same. It's going to just give you some confidence that you're going to need as you first start teaching. To your peers, to when you do your community classes, when you're teaching to me, Julie, Alexander, or Victoria, Amanda, whoever comes in to sit and to watch and to listen, because we pull people in. So you'll find your groove and you'll find your teaching style and you'll find what works for you, whether you want to mirror or not mirror. Sorry, my allergies are killing me today. Voice projection, and we can practice some of that mirroring even. Well, I don't know that I'll ever see you in person. Well, I see Patty in person, but practice teaching to your family or your friends if you are comfortable being around people. And if you've taught group fitness before, these are not new concepts to you. Well, even teaching in a classroom, what happens when you turn your back to your kids for too long? Not much good sometimes. So be precise and clear with your words, your direction. Avoid extraneous information. A lot of us have nervous tics. I realize by watching these videos that I swallow and make a noise. I don't know. I also talk with my hands. But you don't have to fill all the silence with your words. You don't, allow room for silence. It's a little bit uncomfortable at first, but you want to allow room for silence. Those are just some little teaching tips. But mirroring, use anchors in the room. It's going to make it easier on you, and it takes a little practice at first. You could say press firmly into the floor with the hand closest to the mat wall, and inhale, raise up the hand closest to the window. Or you're not even go into that much detail. It just depends on the level of class you're teaching. There's nothing wrong with walking around. I highly suggest walking around, because how else are you going to be able to see what everyone in that room is doing? You want to make sure they're being safe, that their knees are not protruding over their toes, that they don't have that really severe arch in their lower back. You want to see what your class is doing. They are there to trust you as the expert. I don't ever want to be called the expert on anything. I'm knowledgeable, but I don't want to ever be called an expert on anything. So they are trusting you to guide them into a safe practice. So watching what people are doing, looking around the room, walking behind them, walking to the side of them. You don't ever have to touch them if you're not comfortable doing that. Julie will talk to you more about hands-on adjustments. I like to use verbal cues And that's why I like alignment so much, and why I'll give you a lot of alignment cues, both when I'm teaching and during our YTT. I love doing that part of it. Well, I love all parts of it. So if you are behind them and you need to model a little bit, that's okay too. And don't feel like we're telling you you cannot model, because we all do it. And I have a hard time now that I've been back teaching some live classes, I have a hard time not modeling, and it's like I don't know where to draw. I don't know where to find that balance yet. It'll come organically when it's ready. I know it will. So look for landmarks. I think I've said this like 100, or maybe I don't know how many times during this lecture. Look for landmarks that you are visible to you and your students. Be able to accurately describe the postures, how you want them to get into them. And if you need to turn your back, that's okay, but make sure you turn back around so they can hear you. You're going to have to project over your music. And, there's nothing wrong with walking around. You don't have to stay on your mat. I don't even teach with a mat anymore. I just wander around. Now, when I'm teaching virtually, I teach on my mat. Well, for one thing, I'm on the deck, or I'm on the carpet, and my feet slip a little bit, and on the deck, it's just all branches and sticks and stuff, so I don't like to stab myself. When I teach in the studio, I don't use a mat, and you don't have to either, but you could, because that could be like your security blanket too. That's like where you can keep coming back to feel comfortable. All of these things we'll talk about more when you start to teach, when you're starting to practice teaching, and there'll be things that we remind you of continuously throughout this process. But just Julie wanted me to give you a little bit of information on mirroring versus non-mirroring. And it's up to you, because I do mirror a little bit, and just be very aware. Remember that all of our bodies are so completely different. What feels good to you may not feel good to somebody else, and you may be able to put your leg round behind your head, and there might be someone who can barely lift their leg up off the floor. So you are not up there to show off. You're not up there to showcase your skills. You're up there to lead them through a practice and to showcase your knowledge of the practice, and help them to find their way in their yoga practice. Someone once, I read this quote, and I cannot remember where I read it, and it was a couple years ago, and I'm sure I'm paraphrasing, but it was something about, don't be the sage on the stage, but be the guide on the side. This is not this is not where you come to perform or come to, like I said, showcase your talents and show off. That's not a good thing. You're there to help them, and you want to be able to guide them safely. So use your knowledge, and everyone will get to where they're going safely. So I will see you again soon.